Throughout history, trucks have witnessed major technological advances, but they've also been burdened with features that today we'd consider dangerous. At the time, these were clever, even necessary solutions, but over time they proved to be risky for drivers and those around them. In this video, we're going to take a look at those features of old trucks that disappeared, not because of fashion, but for safety reasons. Do you dare to find out what they are? Steering wheels that looked like they were from the future, but were a real headache. At the height of the space age, when the world was dreaming of rockets, satellites, and interplanetary travel, automotive designers also got swept up in that futuristic fever. During the 1950s and 60s, bold ideas emerged, like butterfly-shaped or semicircular steering wheels. And not just in sports cars, but also in some experimental trucks. Can you imagine driving a road monster with a steering wheel that looks like it came straight out of a spaceship? The idea was bold: remove the top part of the wheel to improve dashboard visibility and give the interior a sense of innovation. And even though they looked striking, the reality on the road wasn't so kind. Those strange steering wheels turned out to be uncomfortable on long trips and impractical for maneuvers that required speed and precision. It didn't take many years before the industry went back to the reliable, round steering wheel everyone knows. What started as a revolution ended up as just a story for the museum. Mirrors so long they looked like wings. In the 60s and 70s, seeing a Kenworth WA900 or a Peterbilt 359. Without those huge long-arm side mirrors, it was almost impossible. They were a style icon, but also a necessity for truckers hauling endless trailers down the highways. Thanks to those extended metal arms, the driver could see everything happening around them, from the sides of the truck to the very last axle of the trailer. But these mirrors didn't just serve a practical purpose, they became part of the truck's visual character. Trucks like the Mack R Series or the International 9800 looked imposing, with those protruding arms, giving them an aggressive look that won over fans of heavy transport. The problem came later. In cities, narrow streets, or heavy traffic, these mirrors were magnets for bumps and accidents. Today, those long arms have been replaced by more modern solutions, like cameras and sensors, even 360-degree vision systems that offer better visibility without taking up extra space. An evolution that showed that aesthetics don't have to be at odds with safety. Levers that looked like broomsticks, but were pure power. If you've ever seen a Mack Air Series or a Kenworth W900 from the 70s, you probably noticed something hard to ignore. A gear shift lever that seemed endless. It came up from the floor and reached almost to the windshield. These extra-long levers weren't just for show. They were working tools that allowed you to shift through more than a dozen gears with precision. And yes, in an era when automated transmissions were just a dream, these levers represented mastery, strength, and absolute control over the machine. The driver felt like the captain of a giant ship, with one hand on the command that guided tons of steel. But it wasn't all glory. Those levers were so long that, in emergencies or heavy traffic, they were more of a hindrance than a help. Shifting gears required effort and coordination that were anything but simple. The arrival of automatic transmissions brought relief. Today, modern trucks use compact, safe, and efficient systems, which let you focus more on driving than on physical effort.
Sharp metal emblems. Pride with an edge. From the 1950s to the 1970s, trucks weren't just powerful, they had attitude. And how did they show it? Through sharp metal emblems that stood out like badges of war. Mack's Bulldog, the three-dimensional Peterbilt or Freightliner logos. All symbols of power, reliability, and style. These emblems were made from tough metals and gleamed in the sun like trophies. They conveyed brand pride and mechanical strength. But they also had a dark side. In an accident, their sharp edges and rigid structure could become real weapons, causing serious injuries to pedestrians or significant damage to other vehicles. That's why, as safety standards evolved, these emblems were softened into safer versions made from plastic and flexible materials. Today, the originals are considered collector's items, relics of a time when style and risk went hand in hand. Cabover Trucks, when safety was the sacrifice. For nearly 3 decades, the famous Cabover Trucks dominated the roads, especially in Europe. They were practical, maneuverable, and maximized cargo space. The key? No hood. The driver sat right above the engine, shortening the vehicle's overall length. Trucks like the Pegaso Comet, the Barreros Azur, or the French Berliettes became kings of urban and intercity transport. But that practicality came with a steep cost: driver safety. In a frontal crash, there was no hood to absorb the impact. The hit went straight into the cab. As safety regulations became stricter in the 1990s, the design had to evolve. Today, cabovers haven't disappeared, but they've been redesigned with crumple zones and structures that offer far better driver protection. A clear example of how efficiency can never come before life. Vertical exhaust stacks, the roar that defined an era. There was a golden age of heavy trucking when you could spot an icon from far away, and often, what gave it away wasn't just its imposing silhouette, but the pair of exhaust stacks rising proudly behind the cab. Yes, we're talking about the legendary twin vertical exhaust stacks, a signature of giants like the Kenworth W900 and the Peterbilt 379. In the 1960s and 70s, these stacks weren't just a way to vent exhaust, they were a statement of character. They rose like chrome chimneys, slightly tilted back, sending the engine's roar into the sky, away from the ground, away from the trailer, away from anything ordinary. Functionally, they kept toxic gases away from operators, improved visibility when hauling bulky loads, and kept pedestrians and other vehicles from being engulfed in a cloud of smoke. But what truly made them unforgettable wasn't their practicality, it was their presence. At a time when truckers were beginning to customize their rigs as true extensions of themselves, vertical stacks became a symbol of power and style. At truck shows and customization contests, they were like a gleaming steel crown, marking the kings of the road. However, every icon has its dark side. Over time, these vertical stacks were questioned, not for their looks, but for the risks they posed. Being so close to the cab, the hot gases, and sometimes toxic ones like carbon monoxide, were a real hazard to occupants. In accidents, the risk of fire rose sharply if the exhaust was damaged or gases met hot or flammable surfaces. And as expected, evolution spares no legend. New environmental and safety regulations forced the industry to abandon this beloved design. Exhaust systems became more discreet, side-mounted or even hidden, prioritizing efficiency and driver protection. Today, twin vertical stacks survive as nostalgic pieces, adorning classic trucks that still turn heads at shows and on highways, reminding us of a time when engines roared to the sky.
Windows to the past, the curious legacy of sliding windshields. Before air conditioning became standard even in the most modest cars, truck drivers had to come up with clever solutions to survive the scorching heat of the asphalt. And one of the most curious, and now almost forgotten, was the sliding or fold-down windshield. Imagine driving for hours in the sun without a breath of fresh air in the cabin. Then you simply unlock the windshield, slide it out, or fold it down. A stream of fresh air flows through the cabin, renewing not only the environment but also the driver's mood. This type of windshield was a revolution during the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s. In models like the Ebro B45 in Spain or the Lancia Exagema in Italy, they were as essential a feature as the steering wheel. Not only did they provide ventilation without relying on complex mechanical systems, but they also helped improve visibility by eliminating fogging and generating air circulation. But, like all ingenious craftsmanship, it wasn't without its flaws. These windshields didn't offer the same structural resistance as fixed models and, in the event of a collision, they could come loose or even fly off, with potentially serious consequences. What's more, they didn't seal completely. Dust, rain, and even bugs could sneak in uninvited, turning any storm into a rather unpleasant experience. With technological advances came air conditioning, sealed cabins, reinforced glass, and sliding windshields gradually disappeared. Today, they're a rarity that we only see in classic vehicles or very faithful restorations, as a nostalgic nod to an era when functionality and creativity went hand in hand, even if sometimes at the expense of safety. Conclusion: when the past roars with every kilometer, looking back at the history of trucks is to discover a universe full of ingenious solutions, aesthetic details with soul, and a passion for the road that went beyond technology. From exhaust pipes that rose like towers to windshields that opened like windows to the wind, each of these elements tells us something about the truckers of that era. Their desire for freedom, for style, for efficiency in their own way. Today, we live in an era where everything is calculated down to the millimeter, where efficiency rules and safety is the top priority. But we can't deny that there's something deeply human about those parts that are no longer made. Because they weren't just parts of a truck, they were part of a way of life. And do you also think that some of these features should make a comeback? Which part of this story do you find most fascinating? If you enjoyed this and you're passionate about the world of trucks, you're sure to love this one too. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any videos about these giants of the road.